Today's episode of SDN was recorded on Monday, November 6, 2023. It's airing on Saturday, November 11, 2023. The focus of this discussion is avoiding mass gatherings of angry people or escaping a heated environment if you find yourself on the X in what the left refer to as a peaceful protest. That term has become a misnomer, which goes without saying. The video clip currently playing is from a pro-Hamas demonstration that occurred in New York City last night, where American flags were desecrated and the Palestinian flag was raised. This also happened during last weekend's demonstration at the White House that broke through the outer perimeter of security. Suffice it to say, we're going to see more demonstrations funded by the Soros Foundation. Anytime there's a large gathering of angry people, the probability of mob violence goes up dramatically. It's not a situation most people want to be caught in. Before we get to our discussion, here's a news clip from last night in New York City.
Kristallnacht, America's young, woke terror supporters are out in full force in New York tonight. The second night in a row, we're going to show you some video from last night's pro-Hamas, pro-Palestine rallies here as thousands reminded American Jews that they're not even safe in our most progressive city. Look at this video. Many offices actually closed today in anticipation of night two of what's happening in New York. Last night, thousands of radicals marched right through the streets of New York to the New York Times. Unafraid, emboldened in a country that consistently capitulates to their radical left ideology, they fear nothing. You see a cop car here spray painted with KKK, IDF, and Free Gaza. People who cheer on terrorism, calling the Jews and anyone who supports them KKK.
And we're back with Keith Graves and Mike Sterling. The theme of today's episode is how to avoid getting on the X when a peaceful protest breaks out around you, or how to get off the X if you find yourself in that situation. Keith, let's start with you.
The biggest thing is if you see a peaceful protest, you want to avoid it. You just want to leave. Every peaceful protest or every violent protest starts off peacefully. It takes a while for the cops to get there because the local agency is not going to be able to handle that riot unless you're in New York City. Okay. But even San Francisco, LA, Oakland, these bigger cities, they end up calling mutual aid. And what mutual aid is, you call one command, usually call the sheriff's department, and then they speed dial all these different agencies, and every agency has to give up a certain percentage of their cops to come help. And being in Alameda County, California, which is communist central, it's Oakland and Berkeley, to give our viewers an idea. I worked there for 30 years. And there was a big period of time where I didn't go there, but there at the beginning of my career, my end of my career, I was in Berkeley and Oakland a lot on mutual aid. It took us an hour driving red lights and sirens to get through the traffic, to meet up with what's called a pathfinder, who takes you to where you need to go control an intersection, a building, root out people, what have you. And that's not including certain agencies have consent decrees where they're not allowed to use tear gas. They're not allowed to use wooden dowels to disperse crowds, so that they have nothing to manage the crowd. So you have these issues. So if you are, let's say, out to dinner and all of a sudden you see the protest starting, you want to leave. It's not time like, hey, let's finish our dinner and then we'll pay the bill in a minute, finish our drink, and then leave. It's like, no, we're out now. It could be fine. It could not be. And many times you're like in a big riot and you see regular people in there and you're like, you don't want to be here. And they're like, no, come to me, and like you try and get them out and find a safe place for them to go.
Tony Blauer frequently says, whether it's a hairy situation or not, that you have to have the courage to take action. So in other words, I still have half of a drink or some food here, but this riot's going on. You have to have the courage to say, I'll leave that food behind and I'm getting out of Dodge. But we should probably preface the rest of this conversation by saying the reason we're covering this topic is because of the pro-Hamas demonstrations that occurred this past weekend around the world. And we're back to the Soros Foundation essentially funding that stuff. Can you speak to that? When you mentioned something offline when you were asking what people's vocation was. Got some interesting answers.
So you'll make mass numbers of arrests. You've got all these people under arrest, and none of them are from the city that you're at. They're all brought in. We fill out an arrest report form, and in that arrest report form, it's your typical name, date of birth, that kind of information. But one of the questions on there is, what's your occupation? Every single time, it's professional protester. They admit, I'm a professional protester. That's my job. and they go city to city. And I'll give you an example. Part of this too is you doing an area study, what's around you and what are the potential conflicts. So back in 2020, when we had all the George Floyd riots, I'm in Boise now. We knew that BLM was trying to make an impact upon our city because they were collapsing every city around us, including Salt Lake City, which I did not think would have an issue. So when BLM came out, a bunch of us put out social media stuff saying we've got to stop them. And so all the retired cops from California came out. I mean, we're talking hundreds. And they went back to their old jobs and they started doing counter surveillance, and they found buses of protesters coming in, notify the cops so the cops can go take them out. And it was basically like a force multiplier. And so what we ended up doing, it wasn't just us, it was patriots coming from all over the state. There was maybe 300 protesters, which could cause a lot of damage. There were well over 3,000 patriots there to just say, like, hey, you're not going to get away with anything. And it stopped any rioting from happening. If you're not fortunate enough to live in a community like that, and there's a reason why all these California cops are moving to this area, and it's for that reason, because we know it's less likely to happen. I've also been stuck in California where you can't leave. These professional protesters, just like they came to Boise, they're going to come to your area too. And if you're not in a position to stop them, then certainly you need to start thinking of how am I going to get out of this? Can I relocate temporarily until this blows over? I know me personally, I don't want to because I want to protect my house. So then you got to think to yourself, what am I going to do for my house? Because not everything is going to be deadly force. You have a crowd in front of your house, but can't necessarily shoot them. And a good example is in Florida, there was that couple where the protesters came to their house and they were standing out there with ARs, and then they got arrested for displaying a weapon. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm like, that's awesome that you're doing that, but you can't. There's no deadly force issue there. If you only had a pepper ball gun or bear spray or something else, and I brought that up before in another video I've done for you, where you have to have these less lethal options, this intermediary that you can push people back. And the minute you do that, they're going to stay away from you because they realize you fight back and they want to leave you alone.
So there's a shameless plug. You can see the orange components behind me. That's a Byrna Mission 4 less lethal rifle that actually shoots CS rounds, pepper rounds, kinetic rounds. I took a kinetic round in the back. Was not the wisest decision I ever made.
So today I have a Byrna coming to me now, and we're going to evaluate that and gas masks at the same time. We're going to do that over at Christian Warrior Training just to determine like what's a good intermediary, less lethal weapon. We are going to shoot somebody. It's probably going to be me. But here's the other thing. One of the things we talk about, you're stuck in this protest. You're not going to be able to shoot your way out. There's too many people. You're not going to dump 100 bodies. You don't have enough ammo for that. You want to be a gray man on the way out. But if something happens where they confront you, like let's say I'm wearing a Boise Black Rifle shirt and it's got a big AR-15 on the back, and they realize that I am the enemy and they're coming after me, and it's like crap. If you've got that big canister of bear spray like we talked about, and you start hosing people and working your way out of there, the better off you are. You have to have the intermediary. But if you're going to carry it, you should be hit by it and know what it does. Number one, in case it gets used against you, if it gets taken away and gets used against you. So that way you can use appropriate force to counter that. I can't answer a question for you, but if somebody took that bear spray from you and they're trying to hose you, and then you try to defend yourself, they're going to ask you, well, how do you know that's a deadly force situation? Because I've been sprayed with bear spray before. And I know I'm incapacitated, and I know I won't be able to fight back, and he's going to disarm me and kill me. Remember Reginald Denny during those riots way back in the 90s, right?
Do you want premium ad-free content? Duh. Content that's not censored by big tech, of course. Well, with SD Insider, you can get behind the scenes and a whole lot more. Link in the description.
We had a video that we did on essentially the castle doctrine and stand your ground laws. And Don Mann made a recommendation that if you didn't have a gun and you're looking for an improvised weapon, to spray an attacker with bug spray, wasp spray, something like that. We had a commenter down below that said that we were promoting illegal activities and that it was against the law to spray somebody with bug spray.
Oh, I've heard that. Yes.
And the castle doctrine in most states is pretty clear that you can use deadly force to protect your domicile. So in your experience, many years of being in law enforcement, is it illegal to spray somebody with bear spray or wasp spray when you're being attacked?
Okay, so caveat, there's 50 states with 50 different laws.
Fair enough.
So somebody did that on my channel because I brought up use bear spray. I like, and the caveat, I like bear spray better because it's bigger. There's more of it. It's fairly the same concentration, right? It's not too far off. It's not that big of a deal. Okay. It goes farther. It's great. And somebody made the comment of like, you're promoting, this illegal activity. I'm like, that's awesome. I didn't know that. Can you let me know what the code section is, please? Because you always hear like, why don't you arrest this man for this? Awesome. What's the section for arresting him? Because every crime has a section. You have to go back to look at that section. And in that section are elements of the crime. For drug possession, they have to know it was drugs. Well, if they didn't know it was drugs, then it's not a crime. The cop is going to have to prove how they knew that was a drug, right? So it doesn't matter what it is. There's always an element to the crime. I've not seen anything about bug spray. I've not seen anything about bear spray. Everybody keeps saying that. If you know what that specific section is, put it in the comments. I want to see what it is.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. The funny thing was that this particular individual said it was a federal statute, but couldn't quote the federal statute.
They go to. It's a federal statute that you can't do that. Okay, what's the section?
Yeah. So now that we're kind of on this wavelength, Mike, I got a question for you. So you've been in some pretty hairy situations in the Middle East where you're vastly outnumbered. You're on the X. What's your advice to somebody who finds themselves on the X because they didn't see it coming?
Just like Keith was talking about, this all goes back specifically to if you remember the discussion that we had a while back about when I was in New Orleans, needing to extract yourself from one of these situations at that point and basically doing a urban get out of Dodge bag. The first thing is try not to be seen. Blend as much as you can. And that's why I always carry in that bag, try to carry a black hoodie and a face mask. Oh, he's one of ours. I'm going to slide out of there as fast as I possibly can. I'm going to move laterally. I'm not going to move along with the crowd. A lot of the time, you can slide laterally. You can get out of these things. If you're lucky, try and slide out of that as fast as you can. You may not be able to get to your wheels. That's the bottom line. You may not be able to get to your own wheels. So you may wind up just brake left, brake right, get out of there, find some sort of shelter, try to distance yourself from that. First things first, camouflage is a beautiful thing.
So in other words, wrap yourself in a Palestinian flag at this point in time.
Hey, look, man, at that point,
the police grenadier is going to aim for you, bro.
Yeah.
Sorry.
You know what? I'll take one of those hits if it means I can get out of there. It's going to suck. But now if I got to go kinetic, yes, the bear spray is a beautiful thing. I will switch over to unrestricted chemical warfare like that. All right. Don't think that I won't. Of course, trying to do that from a limited perspective, the good thing is in one of those clouds, nobody knows what's going on. I mean, if you've been in one of these kind of crowds, nobody really understands what's happening more than 2 or 3 people away from each other. If you got your bear spray, don't point it out, scream, get away from me, because now you're going to get mobbed. But if you can just, from concealment, smack that one person that saw you in the face real quick and then move out of the area, if you could do that, do so. I do like the bear spray, just like you, Keith. I'm a big fan of the foam-based stuff that law enforcement really pushed a long time ago, because boy, I'll tell you what, man, I've blown some pepper spray before, and the whole, how do you know what this stuff feels like? Oh, you're working in a 360-degree environment like that, you're going to need some of that. Guarantee it. You're going to need some of that. You should know what it is like, just like you said, Keith. You should know what that stuff is like before going into there, so that you can try to hold it together a little bit longer. You're going to be able to see squat.
We did this. We did a tear gas test on a mask with Denny Chapman, and the mask initially performed fairly well, but it was a hot summer day here in Florida, so it was like 110 degrees with the heat index, and his sweat was picking up particulates that were on him and going down in behind his nose and his mouth. So he got some initial protection, but the subsequent 45 minutes after the fact, he paid a price for it, even with a mask.
Mike brings up some good points about moving laterally for basic crowd control management. They call it crowd management. It's riot control. If you're in a riot, the cops are always going to leave an out, and they're actually going to funnel the crowd. Basically, it's like, hey, you can go this way, but you're going to get your ass beat over here. And a lot of good people choose to go that way. Go that way, right? The other thing is, if you can move, you're right, they're very linear. And if you can break off, when you go to the side, there's going to be teams. If it's been going for a while, you're going to have teams that are coming along. and they're going to allow you to, they're going to look at you and they're going to kind of assess because they don't want to keep you in there. And they know regular people are coming out. And I've had people come out, they're like panic. They have the panic look and it's like, come on over here. I always took the time if it wasn't busy, like, where are you going? What are you trying to do? Like, my car's stuck in there. Hey, if you go up 10 blocks, there's a restaurant over there. Go hang out there. We have intelligence. We've, we'll talk about the White House and some failures there. We have people working undercover that are in the crowd that are listening to what's going on. I don't want to give away too many tactics, but we target the main people. We figure out who the main people are. We start targeting them and then we go grab those people. We have people on the roofs doing observation. We have helicopters and drones up. We know where the crowd is going to go. We're watching social media, Twitter. We were talking earlier about Twitter is like the best intel gathering source for fast growing events. We're social media scraping. So we have an idea of what things are going to happen and where they're going to go. And everybody kind of knows that on the outlying areas. The cops aren't going to be able to protect you because there's just too much going on. But be nice, because a lot of people come like, tell me what to do. And they're like, they're going to be like, well, fuck you.
And hands out.
I've had enough today.
As soon as you're approaching that line, flat hands out.
And just go, hey, can I ask for some help? I want to get out of here and do that. I was just eating dinner down here. I'm not from here. I don't know where to go. A lot of them will give you directions on how to get out. But just know that they're overwhelmed too, because they know that for the next 24 hours, they're not going home. They may not have a change of clothes. They may not have had eaten for the last 12 hours. They may not have water for the last 8 to 12 hours. They're hangry. They're thirsty. They probably got to pee. And
probably got slapped by a brick at some time in the last 12 hours.
Well, and then you got to understand what's going on in that riot. People are throwing pee and poo bombs at you, right? You're also restricted. The cops are restricted more than you could ever imagine, man. I'll give you an example. I got sent to Oakland because they were literally burning the city down. I mean, not burning the city, but they were like burning a car dealership and some other stuff. When I roll up, I got my team of guys and they go, hey, we need you to sign this form saying you're going to follow Oakland's use of force policy, because the federal monitor is under federal supervisorship, which does not go well. We need you to sign this form that says you're going to abide by our policies. No, I'm not going to. We're not going to abide by your policies. We have different policies. Our policies are realistic, which is why I work for them and not for you. And they're like, well, you won't be able to help us. And I'm like, well, that sucks for you. See you guys later. And we left. And it just went mayhem. And that's happening more and more. Like Portland, agencies have come out and said, we're not helping you anymore because you have let this get out of control. And you got to understand too, when you see that cop on the street, it's not his fault. It's the leadership's fault. It's the pansies running the show that have allowed this to go on and just make everything miserable and allow these bad things to happen. And people will go, why don't you arrest the chief? For what? Like, what's the section? There is no, I would love to. You think I wouldn't want to arrest the chief? I'd love to. That'd be great. What's the section? There's no crime that's been codified to be able to do that.
Yeah. How about you go down to the DA's office and discuss it with them?
Oh, that's the other thing. You got all these George Soros-backed DAs in Portland, Alameda, San Francisco got rid of theirs, LA County. If you're in LA County, you are in deep shit. We know in 2024, the riots are happening and they're going to make 2020 look silly. They're going to make 2020 look like good times. And if you're not prepared for that, we should probably get into like what you're going to want in a kit if you've got to go to the city. But you got to remember, like Boise, we only have 220,000 people in that city. And I know people say, oh, it's the liberal city. It's still Idaho. They still try to get a foothold there. So really, if you're in a city of more than, let's say, 50,000, you're going to have to worry about this. In the city I worked, we had 100,000 people. And we had riots. I mean, not constantly, but enough over my career that I was going to them in my own city. It was mostly like, oh, we're going to protest nuclear warfare. It was a cruise that got out of control, cruising event, and then everybody starts fighting and it turns into a big problem. All the way up to going to Berkeley and Oakland where they're burning businesses and cars and looting and everything else.
And you touched on it, and I think we mentioned earlier as well, that the Soros Foundation funding these protests and professional protesters. We saw in 2020 that there were pallets of bricks delivered to the venues prior to the peaceful protests breaking out.
I'm Jason Sawyer with Survival Dispatch. As a Survival Dispatch insider, you'll be able to gain the knowledge, the skills, and equipment necessary to protect your family when it really, really matters. They'll provide crucial information on such things as stockpiling food, medical necessities, communication plans. You will receive specific actionable plans. Visit survivaldispatch.com to get started.
This is my personal theory, is that we are absolutely going to see an uptick in these types of riots and protests during the 2024 election cycle. And it's potentially going to be used to say, look, it's a dangerous environment out there. So you need to do mail-in ballots, that they'll continue to force this mail-in ballot thing, because we've seen some recent cases where the Democrats have been caught ballot stuffing. I watched a video yesterday where a lady had a stack like this, and she was fixing to put it in the box, and she looked at it, and the video traces her back to her car. None of the ballots were signed. So the video shows her signing all the ballots, putting them back in, then going to the box and dumping them in. That's my personal theory on why we're going to see more of these protests. It could potentially escalate to the point of martial law if there's that much violence.
We're going to see some really serious riots here over the next 12 to 18 months.
I am in a dark web leftist group, or I'm in a couple dark web leftist groups, and you can see when they're talking to each other, they're accelerationists. They're looking at what's occurring, and they're talking about, this is how we are going to accelerate and take advantage of this to just sow chaos. You have to be prepared for that. The big thing that you need to do here is you need to plan ahead. Some of you don't have a choice. Like me, I didn't have a choice. I lived in a shitty area, in a shitty state, and I'm stuck with it. If you're in that position, you want to make sure that your house is prepared. Number one, you want to look at your house and say, what can I do to fortify my house to keep people out? And I'll give an example. My daughter just moved in a new home. The first thing I did was replace all the screws and the striker plates and the bolts, because they're these tiny little, just nice looking screws. And I've easily booted 1,000 doors on search warrants and everything else. Most of them I can just kick and don't need a ram. You put in 1 3/4 wood screws in there, and it goes all the way into the frame. Just little things like that keep people from getting in there. Putting in a pipe, galvanized pipe attached to the door into the frame, so that the pipe is holding the door together. So if something happens, you can throw that in right away, and nobody's going to kick your door in. Have that intermediary defensive device. I've used a pepper ball gun before. I like it better than pepper spray. I like it better than bear spray, because a lot of people think they're actually being shot. It hurts. And sometimes you got to deliver that pain, in addition to making it so they can't see you, to make them realize, I need to stay away from you. And it's kind of kill one, terrorize 1,000. You take one out, cause a lot of pain, create some gas in the area. Those work wonderfully well. And that works good till it becomes a deadly force situation. Then you can switch and just go back and forth. If you're mobile and you have to go to the city, Mike hit on it, having a go bag with something in it. I recommend that you start carrying a gas mask in your kit. We're going to do a review. We got a couple gas masks coming from different places. We're going to go test them out in a gas environment. I suggest that you have that gas mask with you. Do you absolutely need it? If you can afford it, it's a nice to have. It's just nice to have it. If you don't have it, it's okay. You can get through it. Tear gas is no big deal. We just found out that me and Mike were in the same battalion in the same year way back in the day. One of the great things about the military is doing CS gas chamber training. You realize it's no big deal. And as you become an older soldier and been around this stuff, you realize that you can stand there, not all day, but you can deal with it because you know what's coming and you can fight through it. You may not be able to see real well, but you'll deal with it.
At a certain point, I wound up certifying as a technical escort specialist, was on the emergency response group. I spent a lot of time as to hazardous material technician, full 80-hour course, way more than anybody ever wanted. Or the one thing that I would definitely say when we're just talking irritants, okay, irritants they're the bottom on this kind of stuff. They're pretty easy to go with. Your mask doesn't need to be superior. It's not like you're working against a nerve agent or something like that. Full face mask is the thing, because you got to remember the irritants are not just going to be an inhalation problem. You get that in your eyes, man, I'll tell you what, your tear ducts are going to open up full open, and they are just going to go ahead and run continuously. And man, that makes it really difficult to see. Full face mask on that respirator is a big thing. The filters, you can go with virtually any filter out there. The mask that we got from Parcel Safety, just fine for anything you're going to deal with irritants. They're not a huge deal. If you've got facial hair or you don't have a good seal, you're going to get a little bit of that into there. But a little bit is way better than a lot. Just on an improvised basis, basis, as long as you're not catching it full in the face, even just a regular N95 mask. I've seen N95 mask and a pair of swim goggles work.
Yeah.
Okay. It doesn't work good. It definitely does not work good, but it does work. I'm not saying you should use that. Okay. But you can get some pretty small masks. And even if you have to do a half face respirator with, goggles of some kind, do it, just not vented goggles. Now they're going to fog up on you quick, fast, and in a hurry. And anybody that thinks, oh, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to take that, I'm going to put it in my bag, I'll be able to just do everything that I need to do with it when it's in there. I strongly suggest, if you're going to have a mask of any kind and you intend to use it at any time, you need to put that mask on or whatever it is that you're going to use. And you need to go out, you need to do some nice stringent cardio with that thing on and see just how bad your cardio is, because I'll tell you what, it is going to show you very quickly just how bad your cardio is. Believe me, I know.
It's always fun to run on the street with a gas mask. I love doing that. I used to go for like a 1 mile run every time just with my mask to punish myself back when I was a healthier man. And the looks you get are hilarious. You're right, though. Hit the treadmill. The other thing is, if money is an issue and you can't afford, look at Avon mask, Mira Safety, something like that. You're looking at like $250, $300. If you can't afford that, go on Amazon and MSA full face respirator with P100 filters, and you will be golden. Yeah. It's going to handle everything.
MSA is the standard. I love MSA masks. I'll tell you what, that's all I use for my crews. That's all we've got. MSA masks across the board. We predominantly use the Millennium series because a mountain of those things were produced and pushed out, and I got a bunch of them super cheap. And man, it's a good mask. I strongly recommend it. And the big thing that I really recommend, if you're going to buy a mask, don't buy a mask with little eye holes. Don't do it.
I have an MSA like you're talking about. I remember I left it in the garage. I wish I had it here.
No, I love them. I love them. Full face piece mask.
Yeah.
Because you don't know if you're going to have nice little issues with claustrophobia in a mask until you know. And boy, I'll tell you what, mask claustrophobia only normally comes out when your heart rate's elevated and you're sucking wind and you're trying to do everything you can to struggle for breath. And now you get claustrophobic in that mask. And boy, I'll tell you what, mask claustrophobia is a wonderful thing to watch. So if you've got a full face mask, mask claustrophobia is way, way less of an issue than if you're looking through these nice little Russian ice outserts.
Yep. Just
these little itty bitty tiny peepholes in your surplus Yugoslavian or Czech mask from the 1960s, or God help you if you've got a pull-on, one of those rubber pull-on things. Those things are awful, man. Steer clear of those things.
Don't do surplus. Don't do any surplus mask. I'm looking at Amazon right now. You can go online at Amazon and get a decent MSA mask with filters for $80. And the other thing too is, you were mentioning the Millennium mask. The other thing that we didn't realize, the seals were breaking on those masks. The seals were breaking around the eyepiece to the mask. So you have to inspect your mask all the time. And I'll never forget, we were in a hostage situation, and it was the first time I'd ever been in a home where we delivered gas. Normally you're on the outside, you deliver gas, but we done limited penetration to rescue somebody. And now the suspect was barricaded inside of his house. And we're like, we're not going to lose the ground that we gained. So let's just start gassing them, bring them downstairs, and we'll hook them up. Totally impressive to see the gas go through the house. It's like, man, I haven't seen that yet. That's badass, right? That's intimidating me, and I'm wearing a mask, right?
You guys just open air below it, or did you?
No. We 37 millimeter, launch the rounds in, and then it disperses inside. Sure enough, a couple of my guys on either side start, and I'm like, was your filters bad? And like, we couldn't figure out what was wrong. Well, it turns out the seals were breaking, and they didn't remember when you put your mask on, blow out and then cover your air filters up and then breathe in. And if you can't get any air in, then it's secure. Well, if you haven't been in the military, you don't know to do that. And so they didn't do that. And there was a tiny leak, and they fought through it. They just dealt with it. But it sucked taking some armed man into custody while you're like drooling in your mask.
The biggest reason behind all of that is that they're storing their masks in their car,
yes,
with no maintenance being performed.
Yep.
At the bare minimum, annual maintenance.
Yes.
You need to look at that. Now, the newer masks, their breakdown for the heat and stuff like that is going to be way, way lower, especially MSAs are real big on the silicones. And
Yep.
the silicones do not break down hardly at all. It's a beautiful thing. I love them. We're dealing with stuff that is way, way, way worse.
Yeah.
Having a mask is a great thing in one of these situations. Are you going to be able to employ it rapidly? You never know. Now, if you live in that area and you start lining up with a lot of people in that area, if you're stuck there, man, I'm telling you what, I'm putting my mask on. I've trained with my mask just like you have. Now I've got my mask on and I'm ready to go to unrestricted chemical warfare, quick, fast, and in a hurry. Don't think that I'm not going to break the Geneva suggestions,
Yeah.
quick, fast, and in a hurry.
Back to your point, Mike, with regards to people's conditioning level, one of our viewers sent an email to our support address, I think it was last week, and it's somebody who delivers training for this type of stuff, and said that basically people who got that claustrophobia that you're describing, they were measuring their pulse ox values and their O2 plummeted so much that they didn't black out, but they went to condition black, Jeff Cooper's condition black. So they basically panicked and froze dead in their tracks.
Absolutely.
They weren't getting enough oxygen because of this claustrophobia that you described.
Absolutely. Interesting story for the EOD community. That was always the number one test for us, was the tap suit test. And the old M3 tap suit, it was just absolutely awful. Chris, I'll send you a picture of that stupid thing. The big problem is it's a 35-pound butyl rubber suit that other people have to get you into. You cannot get yourself out of it. You can't even pull your own mask off once you're into it. Oh, that thing was evil. Nothing was going to get in on you. I mean, I guarantee you that. I actually stood ankle deep in a pool of mustard gas with that thing and really had no serious worries about it at all. So that was the very first test that we would do, because not only can you not breathe, but now you can't get out.
Wow.
And if there's any kind of claustrophobia, it is going to be very apparent at that point. We had this kid come in when I was in Texas. He was huge, man. I mean, this guy was big, and we're giving him a test. Big recon trooper. He freaked out about 10 minutes in. And it took like 5 of us to wrestle this guy down to be able to pull him out of that suit. He's beating the crap out of all of us because he's a drowning man. Anybody that thinks that mass claustrophobia is not a real thing has never seen it happen. And I used to see it happen all the time because we were specifically trying to find what's that level. And then I'm going to nudge past that level just a little bit.
And they'll put the mask on and they'll think they're fine. It's when they start doing cardiovascular activity and the oxygen is reduced and you're in an environment that you can't take it off without getting poisoned. That's when it comes out. Another good point, though, when you're wearing all that and you're moving laterally to get out of harm's way, when you come across those cops and there's no gas in the environment, take your mask off, because professional protesters, they all have masks. They've got the swim goggles. They all know what to do. When you come up, they're going to immediately think you're a threat and you're part of the group. You're basically kind of like, think advanced recon. They send their little people out to do an advanced recon to see which police lines are weak so they can reroute and go through those. And so if you come running up, they're going to think, oh, that's you. So even if there's a light whisper of CS in the air, if the cops aren't wearing their masks, take yours off. They can't see facial expressions with a mask on. Okay. So it's like, hey, I'm a friend. And that's the other thing too, is when you have a mask, you want some kind of a voice emitter on it. So on my mask, I have an Avon and I have a voice emitter on it. Don't buy it through Avon. Go on eBay and find some vet bro that's pissed off that sold his for $75, because normally they're like $900.
Wow.
Oh, you're talking about the hog snouts.
Yeah. So plug that
the electronic hog snout. Yeah, those things are good. I keep those.
And so put that on. Some of them, like MSA, they'll have them when you turn it on, a red light is on the front. You just might want to put black tape over that, so that way it doesn't give you away. But you're going to want some voice emitters so you can communicate with people, like be on the phone telling somebody to come pick you up because you're in danger or whatever.
On this topic of CS and backing up a little bit, when you discussed less lethal options, the Chief Revenue Officer and Chief Marketing Officer at Berna is an acquaintance of mine. Luan Pham's his name. He basically touched on the stuff you did, Keith, when you're in a blue district like that has Soros DAs, that if you were to take a shot at somebody who was either breaking into your home or trying to hurt you or whatever with a less lethal device, the chances of not finding a jury where at least one person would side with you because you use less lethal force is very small. And he can't say this because he's an officer at a publicly traded company, but it was suggested by somebody that if an intruder came into your home and you shot with a less lethal and then you put it down and shot with a regular pistol, that you'd be able to say to the jury, well, I tried less lethal and the guy didn't stop, so I had to give him high-speed lead poisoning. I pondered that. And again, I'm not an attorney and I'm not giving anybody advice, and I don't work for Byrna, but I think you'd do it the other way, is save your life first with a real pistol and then shoot a less lethal and say, hey, man, Dr. Jennifer Stank said, don't ever have cameras in your house for that very reason.
It also comes down to situationally. We don't live in an urban environment. We live out of the country. If I get 3 guys coming through my front door, they're there for a purpose. They're there for a reason. You don't just stumble across my house. Those folks are getting ready to take a dirt nap.
I want you to think back to the Florida couple with the gun. Right. Their AR-15, right. One has a pistol, and they're standing out front, and it's just like, stay away. I agree with what they're doing. I would never find them guilty. But the minute I saw that, I'm like, they're going to get done. Even if the cop,
I think that was the McCloskeys, and that was outside of St. Louis.
Oh, that's right. It wasn't Florida. My bad. Let me back up just for a minute. The other thing we should talk about is sustainment, because if you're stuck in that riot and there's no way for you to get out, one good option is to get into an office building or something like that and then work your way up. Protesters are inherently lazy. They're going to go into the ground floor, do whatever they're going to do, and they're not going to move up. And I'll give you a perfect example. My wife and I were at a Boise State game. The bathrooms on the bottom floor of the student union building are just wiped out. No toilet paper. It's just all dirty and nasty. And I'm like, hon, people are lazy. Let's go to the second floor. We literally walked up the stairs. Every bathroom's clean. There's nobody around. People are lazy. Move your way up. Go park yourself, and you're going to wait. If I had advanced warning of going to some kind of a riot, protest, whatever, I had a 3-day bag. And I actually learned it from the Seattle guys from, I think it was the WTO conference, where they just got hammered. I have a change of clothes. I have a ton of water. I've got a bunch of power bars. And then I've got baby wipes, which baby wipes are like the best thing ever to clean yourself up. Mm-hmm. Right. And then I had that in a pack, and I kept it wherever our staging area was. So your staging area could be your vehicle. So let's say you get to your vehicle and you realize we're not leaving because we can't drive out of here. We're stuck. Let's say you live 40 miles away or whatever. You can grab your pack and you can either stay with your vehicle and wait it out, or you can move on and then go find a building, go find some respite somewhere and go work your way up.
So counterpoint on that, we saw this a lot in 2020. We also just very recently saw this in Gaza. Things to just be prepared for on this. Do not think at a certain point that they're not going to burn you out. They've already shown they've already shown their propensity for chucking a couple of Molotov cocktails. If they can't get into the place that you're in, they'll set it on fire. And they've shown a propensity for doing this repeatedly.
Yeah, I'm going off my experience with actually being in riots. I would not pick a building that's in the middle of the riot or where they're going to go. I would go find somewhere else, and I would make sure I have escape routes, just typical standard stuff. If I see them take over a building, it's to loot, it's to get stuff. Have they lit them on fire? Absolutely. But if it's a modern building, it's going to have fire suppression stuff. I haven't been to too many fires to where the fire suppression didn't knock it out. And so you're actually better in a newer building versus an older building that doesn't have fire suppression. Use your common sense. What you don't want to do is you don't want to be on the outside where the crowd shifts and overtakes you, and you can't outrun them, or the cops can come up.
Trampled.
Yes, the cops can come up and say, this area, it's an unlawful assembly, which they have the absolute right to do. This area, it's an unlawful assembly. You have to move on, and you can't be there. You want to try and just get out as far as you can. We're talking like 10, 20 blocks. Move, start going, and then go find a safe place. And then ask the cops when you see them, do you think they're going to come this way? Am I safe here? And they will more than likely give you an honest answer.
I think the only counterpoint that I've got to all that, since Mike raised the word counterpoint, is that you're suggesting to move higher in the building. I think Bruce Willis would disagree with you.
Keep your shoes on.
Yeah. The only reason why I say higher, it's counter to fire and maneuver. We're thinking deadly force, fire and maneuver, stay on the ground. Don't hunker down. If you're sitting somewhere, you should be reloading. If you're moving, you should be shooting. We're talking about something totally different. There's no lethal force that you can do here. This is all less lethal stuff. If you shoot somebody, guaranteed the city you're in, they're going to prosecute you. More than likely, you're in a George Soros DA controlled city. don't think that the rules that apply to you where I'm at in Boise in Ada County, I know that I'm good to go to protect myself. I know if I go to Oakland, I've had this conversation with my wife. I have to occasionally go back to the Oakland area. And I tell her, I'm like, man, if we get into a shooting, we have to determine, do I just run away and this is just another unsolved homicide? Or do I stick around and hope that I don't get charged criminally? There's 2 cops in that county right now.
You're getting charged.
And I'll give you an example. One, there's a man beating people with a baseball bat. The officer enters into the Walmart, tases the suspect. The taser doesn't work because it doesn't have good probe spread. It's got to go far apart. The guy swings the bat at the officer. The officer retreats, shoots, and kills him. They're charging him with murder. He used less lethal. He was being attacked by a deadly weapon. Their justification for charging him is that if you waited for another officer, you wouldn't have had to use deadly force. I shit you not. That's in the charging sheet. You want the guy to wait when he's actively beating people with a baseball bat. That's why cops aren't doing anything in those counties. So if you're in a riot in that area, don't expect that the cops are going to bust their ass to protect anybody, because everybody voted these people in and they're fucking those cops over, and they feel no need to go protect you because you have screwed them over. You are not protecting them. And so now you use deadly force. What do you think they're going to do to you? On me, wearing my Boise Black Rifle shirt, and I'm a white guy, and I just shot a protester. What do you think they're going to do to me? They're going to treat you just like the cops, and they're going to charge you. And so you really have to.
You're obviously a white supremacist. Just look at you.
Oh, I'm bald, man. Bald white guys are always white supremacists, right?
And you're from Idaho.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I know that's the other bad thing, right? I'm not kidding. You have to think, do I need to be there? And a lot of my friends, they don't have a choice. They have to go work there. And now they're stuck. Okay, you got to go to work there. You don't have a choice. Pack your 3-day bag. Have a plan. Every time you go to a place, how would I get out of there? And start looking at places like, they always riot over here because there's stores, there's capitalist America. But over here is an industrial area where the buildings are spread apart and there's really not much out there. You might be better off over in that industrial area because people really don't go over to those industrial areas. They stick to the part where there's commerce and there's like a core downtown kind of area.
We're filming this on Monday, November 6th. If people are watching this video, have not watched the video that airs on November 6th with Tony Blauer on situational awareness, I would highly recommend that they go do that, because all the things that are being discussed today, Tony gets into fine-grained detail on essentially a cheat sheet. If you're in this situation, here's what you should do, so on and so forth. So I just encourage people to go back and read that, number one. Number two, there's no way to say this without being political, but NBC just broke a story that Obama is essentially running a shadow government. He's the puppet master behind Biden. And many of us have been saying that right from the get-go. There's an interview with Obama in 2020 where he said he would love to have a third term where he was controlling somebody with an earpiece and instructing them on what to do. So it's ironic that NBC, of all news organizations, would break this story. But the reason I bring it up, Keith, is because you've mentioned Soros a couple times. Mike's mentioned Soros a couple times. And Obama has a very close relationship with George Soros and his son. I can't remember his son's name now, the one who's actually running the show. And this is just my personal opinion, but if I look at what happened over the course of the weekend, 300,000 people, protesting at the White House. You have these protests around the world. There was one in Germany where they interviewed some immigrants, whatever you want to call them, and they basically said, we're going to take over Germany. We're going to throw the German constitution out, and we're going to institute Sharia law. And where I'm going with this is that personally, when I see what happened over the weekend and leading up to it, it seems to me that these pro-Hamas demonstrations are like BLM rebooted. They're virtually identical as far as how they coalesced, who's funding them, their purpose of causing fear, uncertainty.
It goes back to the professional protesters. It's the
exactly. And that's my point. My point is simply that Obama, tight with the Soros Foundation, they used these strategies in the 2020 election cycle. They used them in the 2016 election cycle. And that's kind of the reasoning behind some of us who are saying, this is what's coming. I mean, if he who forgets history is doomed to repeat its mistakes, right?
The issue is Hamas now. The issue next week, next month, it doesn't matter what it is. It's people are taking advantage of the situation is
right.
What they're doing, because they want anarchy, that they just want to destroy America. I want to touch on what you were talking about the White House. offline, we were talking about the White House. Can you just talk about how they breached perimeters and stuff like that and wasn't on mainstream media? Can you talk about that real quick?
Yeah, we're going to add some B-roll to this video, but essentially there were 300,000. That was the crowd estimation. And
150,000
well,
was the revised.
okay.
Yeah.
So 150, 300,000, ton of people. But they penetrated the first barrier around the White House. Yeah, it managed to get to the second layer. And then some of them actually penetrated the second layer by climbing over the fence. Secret Service, got a hold of them at that point in time. Yeah. And they vandalized that inner circle as well. So there's all kinds of graffiti paint. They spray painted red handprints on a bunch of stuff, trashed a bunch of our monuments. They hung the Palestinian flag from a bunch of our monuments. Realistically, whether it's 150,000 or 300,000 people, if they really did want to storm the White House, there's no way they could be repelled. There'd be a lot of dead bodies, but those numbers are kind of insurmountable. And I could just imagine the fear of the people in that general area. I can't imagine living there or working there.
So I am not a conspiracy theorist. I don't buy into a lot of conspiracies. However, what was conspiracy 5 years ago is true today. With that said, it bewilders me. It makes me think that it's purposeful to allow them to get to that point, because I've been involved in those intelligence gathering sessions. You have guys assigned to nothing but social media. You have guys that are doing nothing but working undercover. You have all this intelligence going on. You have to know that the number one building for them to go to, number one, is going to be the Capitol and the White House. Those are going to be two big targets. And you're telling me that you didn't prepare your defenses so they couldn't even breach the outer perimeter? That's ridiculous. Again, they weren't on the mainstream media. I'm watching this on Twitter. I'm watching people at the inner perimeter. And to see that happen, my view when I saw it was that has to be purposeful. There's no way, because we would have sent all cops there. We would have gassed the shit out of everybody. We would have beanbagged everybody and pushed them back. And none of that was happening. That tells me they were telling the cops not to do something. Because for us, we have a lot of autonomy. When I show up with my squad of 12 people and I arrive, I meet my Pathfinder. Pathfinder is the guy, let's say we're in DC. We would meet with a DC officer, it's usually a supervisor. Follow us, we need you to take control of this intersection. When I roll up, it's up to me on how I'm going to control that intersection. Well, for me, I don't want my guys to get hurt. You guys, the minute there's violence, they're burning, they're hurting people, whatever, we give our announcement, unlawful assembly, leave. If they don't, we tear gas, we hit them with beanbags, stuff like that, less lethal munitions, but giving them an option. You can stay and get pummeled or go out that direction, which leaves you to an area where you can now get on mass transit and get out. And that's it. So if I'm a team leader and I'm finding out they're breaching the perimeter of the White House, I'm deploying gas. I'm starting to put stuff out so they can go lateral. I've been there. I've been in the White House. There's different ways to go. I would push them out. For that to not happen, some commander told them not to do that. Why would you do that? That doesn't make sense to me. And now you're the poor citizen. You're there with your family visiting the White House because you're doing the Great American Vacation. And you're there with your kids, which I've been there with my kids. I've been inside the White House with my kids. I'm standing there and all of a sudden it approaches because I'm not watching the news. I don't know what's going on in DC. I don't care. I'm just enjoying my vacation. And now there's 150,000 people about to breach this. You better start moving, man, because they're kind of screwing the regular people that are there too, because all that is to protect the regular people that are there too. It's not just the occupants inside. It's all the visitors and everybody else. And they've done nothing. You're on your own in a lot of these places. That defund the police, it worked. And I don't think people realize that. And so you need to take charge of your own security and realize I need to get out of here and start moving laterally and move out.
The mayor of DC, I haven't heard her comments on this past weekend, Miriam Bowser, but she was front of the line to defund the police. And now I saw, I don't know, maybe a week ago, she was complaining that they can't recruit enough police officers and how they have this massive shortfall. I don't remember the exact numbers, but I want to say that they're somewhere around, need an additional 1,200 police officers to hit their quota of where they should be. But they created the situation themselves. But I'm convinced now that mainstream media is covering things like Obama being involved, I'm absolutely convinced that because they were unsuccessful in recent attempts to scare the shit out of people to go get another shot, which they were trying to reboot the whole, whatever you want to call it, and then use that as justification for another mail-in federal election where they gamed the system last time around. Because that didn't come through, I think this is their plan B, as I mentioned earlier. They're going to scare the shit out of people with all of these violent protests. And this is just the beginning. What happened on the weekend's nothing, like you said, compared to what's coming, but it's justification for mail-in voting and or martial law.
Don't be scared. We know it's coming. Don't let it alter your life too much. I have to go to a major metropolitan area next week. I'm not looking forward to it. I know it's one of the cities that's on the list that has Hezbollah sleeper cells in it. I've been to this city multiple times, but I have to go because I have to teach at a law enforcement conference. So when I go, I'm going to have my active shooter kit with me, but I'm also going to have crowd control stuff with me. And my whole plan is just to be able to either deal with an active shooter or deal with if I'm stuck in a riot control area. The other thing to remember, you talked about defunding the police and lack of cops. I teach cops every week. Every week I'm doing some law enforcement class. When I'm doing that class, I routinely ask people, what's your staffing? Where are you at? The highest is 75% staffing. The average is right around 50 to 65. That means you have no investigators, no undercover unit, no traffic unit. You basically have people on patrol only responding to 911 calls. And you really don't have much room for anything else. So when a riot pops off, there's not enough cops. The people they are hiring, so I'm retired. Most of my friends that are leaving police work are doing background investigations. And so their only job is to do and the backgrounds are pretty intense. The background investigations, the people are passing that would not have passed 10 years ago because they're lowering standards. And it's become a self-fulfilled prophecy of the police are bad. Look, man, I don't believe the police are bad. I think there were certain bad police departments, but as a whole, policing wasn't bad. It is going to become bad because you're hiring people that are going to cause chaos. A lot of my friends are stuck. I can see it in the class when I show up. I see like the OGs, the old school guys. And I'm like, yeah, those guys are good. And I see these new breed. They make me a little nervous. There's some really good ones in there, but there's also some really bad ones that I can see. And ultimately, I mean, if you want to know my deep conspiracy on this, I think the whole reason behind the defund the police is because they want to have a federal police force, which would be bad for America because Obama has said he wants a federal police force. A lot of Democrats have said that. That's the only way we can reform the police is by having a federal police force. Well, then guess what? For gun rights, anything like that, if like my sheriff, like I live in a sanctuary city for 2A. Okay. So
okay, cool.
So they like legit, it's like, they don't like it's hilarious. It's a free for all for guns. It's awesome. I love it. A federal police force can come in. They can pick 12 guys from the East Coast, bring them in, and now enforce those laws. And that's why you don't want that. But I'm kind of getting deep into the weeds, but I'm trying to let you know that if you're stuck in a riotous situation, don't count on anybody to come help you. You need to help yourself and have all the tips that we gave you. Put all that to heart. And a lot of people don't prep for that. You need to prep for that.
I would also go back to Mike's point when he was discussing the masks and physical conditioning. We try not to harp on, that topic too much, but the fact remains that whether it's a riot situation or not, when SHTF happens, the vast majority of people are not in good health. They won't survive.
No.
End of story.
They won't.
It's the most important prep, but it's also the most neglected prep.
Yeah.
It doesn't do you any good trying to protect your house if you stroke out in the first 5 minutes.
Or we've discussed it before, like the shooting at the Texas State Fair where they got their cotton candy in one hand and their Coke in the other hand.
Yeah.
Looking over their sholdder as there's live fire. I mean, just not thinking, not in good shape. And
$9 for this Coke.
Yeah,
it's funny. Like I mentioned in a prior video, humans are the only animal on earth that don't flee when it senses danger. And it's like what Mike said, I paid $9 for this Coke. I'm not going to run you. I'm going to enjoy it. And it's like, it doesn't work that way, man. It's time to take off.
It's back to Tony Blauer's thing. You got to have the courage to take action in everything.
Yeah.
And he makes some great examples. You want to date a girl? Well, you have to have the courage to ask her out on a date. You want to survive an active shooter situation? Then you have to have the courage to seek cover and not just cower in fear, sort of thing. Like the shooting you mentioned at the mosque in New Zealand, where they just piled up in a corner, and it was figuratively the epitome of shooting fish in a barrel.
You saw the video, right?
I did, yeah.
Oh, that's horrible to watch.
It's hard to comprehend.
Or are you going to have the courage to march to the sound of the gun?
No problem, man. When I hear that, I'll be like, "Ooh, I trained my whole life for this. Let's go." Right?
Remember, lives are expensive, but press checks are free.
One of the things that you might want to do, one of the things I do with my church, and one of the things we're trying to do at Christian Warrior Training is try to help people, and we're doing free training. We're not charging anybody for any of this. We want it all for free because we want, even if you're not Christian, head over there to courses.christianwarriortraining.com and go take those courses. They're free. I'm not charging anything for it. One thing we're trying to figure out is how to get people to do stress inoculation. So we're working on a course right now to teach you how to do your own stress inoculation training, because if you